Coming up on Chasing the Natty, Week 6 is in the books, and we're here to bring you everything you need to know from this past week's games. We'll be discussing everything from the most impactful games to whether the freakout is warranted over a couple of top players. And then, as always, we have the brand new set of waiver wire pickups for you guys to sink your teeth into this week. All this and more coming right after this.
Zappy looking to Jared Stearns, who makes the catch and scores. What a burst! Trayvon Henderson, as advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast.
All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning. Week 6, it's come and gone. Again, we're right at the halfway point through the season. Lots of great games yesterday for the most part. A lot of games that I think have started to set the stage for the rest of the season. I kind of started looking a little bit more at the polls because, now we have had plenty of games played. I think the polls are kind of settling themselves out a little bit. We kind of know who are the top teams to look for in every conference at this point. It was a pretty fun Saturday of football, I would say, overall. As always, we got Mr. Nate Marquise here to help us out to recap the week and to give us waiver wire picks. Nate, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Another Saturday in the books. I'm recovering from my Sooners getting totally dismantled yesterday. But Grandma and Grandpa were kind enough to babysit my 2-year-old today just to give us some free time to get some things done around the house.
There you go.
Enjoy some coffee without any distractions. So it's actually been a really enjoyable day so far.
And I'm sure your daughter's loving hanging out with her grandparents.
Oh yeah. They're she loves going over there and terrorizing them for a few hours, and and she kind of gets what she wants when she goes over there. So
of course,
definitely fun for her as well.
That's the best part about not being the parents. Like I don't have any kids yet, but I have 2 nieces, and so every once in a while they'll I'll babysit them and everything like that. And again, it's great because you get to hand them back at the end of the day, and so you don't have to live with the consequences of what you do with them. So
yeah. The one thing the one thing I've realized over the last 6 weeks now is watching football games with a 2-year-old is way more challenging than I anticipated. I'm it'll be right during the middle of, a really crucial part in the game. And I look over at her and she's like halfway up the wall climbing to jump on something. I'm like, what are you doing? Can you please not kill yourself right now or have a massive head injury before this big play?
Exactly.
Just try to chill for a second. So it's certainly an entertaining, and I have to juggle a few things while I'm trying to watch the games now.
No, I believe it. Again, I am many, many years away from being able to take care of my own child, so I will not have to deal with that for many years to come. Nate, we got an awesome show ahead for everybody here today. Again, we're gonna talk about some of these games. We're gonna talk a little bit about some of the injuries that happened yesterday. We'll get into a couple of players that we need to tell people whether the freak out is warranted on them or not. And then, as always, we'll dive right into the waiver wire pickups, who you should be picking up this week. Lots of great names there for you guys. So, Nate, which games did you kind of have your eye on, and which ones do you think kind of provided us the most answers to questions we may have had?
So I was primarily watching in the early slate TCU and Kansas. It was just, man, I don't know if either one of those teams are really that good, but there's just a ton of creativity in the way those offensive systems are ran. And they're 2 totally different systems, but they're really, really entertaining to watch.
Yes.
So it was fun seeing those two teams. It was kind of a bummer to see Jalen Daniels go down so early in that game. But even still, being put on a nice show, and it was back and forth, total shootout. And my boy Quentin Johnson came through for me.
Let's celebrate your boy.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, I made a post in our Slack channel amongst all the CFF guys over at Campus to Canton. I said, okay, this is it. This is the breakout week for Quentin. Here it comes. And I doubled down. I said, I'm even going to trade for him in the leagues that I can. And I did. And I posted it on Twitter. And sure enough, my man came through
big time too.
Just a boss. Yeah. I was like, man, please get a touchdown just to top off this incredible. Like I was looking through his stats. He's never received more than 9 targets in a game. In fact, he's only received more than like 7 targets, like 3 times in his entire career. And I think he had like 15 targets or something like that.
See, the problem with Quentin we all know is the fact that we may not get this the rest of the season. I would love it because, again, 15 targets, that tells me that, like, hey, that they want to make him a focal point moving forward. But at the same time, like, we've said that before. He did this against Oklahoma last year and then just didn't do anything for the next couple of weeks. He's probably going 2 for 15 next week. Let's be real.
Yeah, that's the roller coaster ride that is Quentin Johnston. So, but it was good to see him get off the mat and perform pretty well, at least for 1 week. So yeah, that game had my attention. Oklahoma State, Texas Tech definitely had my attention. Those two offenses were definitely going back and forth. It was fun to see the Kitley offense really rolling. And I was really interested to see what they looked like once I heard there was going to be some changes with their quarterbacks there. So we'll talk more about that. But that was another one that caught my eye. What about you?
Noon slate. I was watching TCU Kansas. On the other screen, I had the LSU Tennessee game. Mostly because, again, I had called earlier in the week. I'm like, LSU's going to upset Tennessee, and boy, was I off the mark on that one.
I think your mistake is that you're calling it at an 11 a.m. kickoff game. It's a totally different atmosphere.
You're right. I thought about that later as a week kind of went on, where I was just like, yeah, if this is at night, this would have been a done deal. But
are you going to call it again this week?
What, Tennessee losing? They're going up against Alabama.
No. The LSU upset for a 7 p.m. game.
Oh, Lord, who are they playing this week? I haven't even looked.
They're playing Georgia, aren't they?
No, we're not playing Georgia.
Oh, okay. I was trying to bait you into that.
You're trying to bait me into. Oh, good Lord, Nate.
I did hear that it will be a primetime game because doesn't Georgia play on the road at LSU this year?
No, we play at Mississippi State this year.
Oh, okay.
Which I am not looking forward to that game. I actually think that's a really bad matchup for Georgia.
That'll be a really interesting situation with Leach's offense versus that Georgia defense. So
last time we played, it was a 1 touchdown game. So, but anyway, Tennessee absolutely dismantled LSU. Tennessee is for real this year. They are looking really good on the offensive side of the ball. I'm still not super trustworthy of their defense, and I think that's something that they're going to have to figure out as they go through the gauntlet that is Alabama and eventually Georgia. I think that they'll be able to put up 35, but I think I think both Georgia and Alabama are going to be able to put up 36 on them, that kind of deal. But I think Tennessee definitely has established themselves as a easily top 10 team right now. They've earned it, and they showed exactly why. Now, granted, LSU is also missing their left or right tackle. They were missing one of their starting tackles. That was pretty good, and they terrorized LSU's offensive line basically all day because of that. So LSU wasn't able to be as performative on offense as I thought they might be. But also, again, it could also just be that Brian Kelly can't run an offense. So we'll see. And Denbrock. Go ahead.
I was looking to see. So that Tennessee Alabama game coming up this next week is in Knoxville. So
it is. Alabama opened as an 8-point favorite. So that atmosphere is gonna be insane. I cannot even imagine.
Yeah, I wonder if we're gonna get back the injured players between Bryce Young and what's his face, the Tennessee Cedric Tillman. So I wonder if both of those guys have a chance to come back
It would be great to see both teams at full health because that's the kind of atmosphere you want in that scenario.
Right.
Afternoon slate. Obviously, if you're following me on Twitter and everything, I was at the Georgia game. I watched the Auburn game. Georgia did something that they haven't really been able to do all year, and that's just pound the rock constantly through that entire game. I think they had like well over 200 rushing yards. Stetson Bennett, awful first half. I think he only had 25 yards, and then ended the day with a little over 200, and also basically outran the entire Auburn defense on a 64-yard touchdown. If you haven't found that clip out there, that was
fast.
Awesome.
Dude, he looked really fast.
Dude, no, I'm not kidding you. He has legit 4.5 speed. Like, Stetson is like, I wish that Monken and Kirby would let Stetson kind of run the ball just a little bit more, especially kind of like how Ashford was doing a little bit yesterday, where it's just like, if nothing's there, just take off and run. I know we have a bit of a drop off after Stetson. I know that sentence in and of itself is not great, but even so, like, that would do. The stadium atmosphere when Stetson took off and ran that ball the entire way, dude.
Oh yeah,
it that place absolutely erupted. That game was fun. Georgia ran away with it in the second half and everything. They got things going a little bit.
Is it going to be enough to get Harsin the axe this week, or are they just saving him till the end of the season? And
I maintain that he is already fired, and they're just letting him ride out the rest of the season. Like the only thing I could see is that maybe I don't think a loss to Georgia was ever going to fire Harsin. I think it was if they fired him in the middle of the season, it would be over a game that they expected Auburn to win. Like if they had lost to Mizzou, that might have been enough to can him there. But even still, I think they're already working behind the scenes to. I think what Auburn wants to do is have their next head coach lined up so they can fire Harsin and then almost immediately announce their next head coach, so that they can then get the ball rolling on the recruiting class for next year.
The old Miami Hurricane move, huh?
Pretty much. That's exact. I think that's exactly what they're doing. It worked out pretty well for Miami in terms of their recruiting class. So, and then after the game, came home. Basically, I had the USC Washington State game on as well, but in reality, I was paying most attention to the Alabama Texas A&M game, and it's one of those things where, like, I wanted Bama so badly to just blow him out, but like the end result didn't surprise me a ton. What did you think about the game, Nate?
Well, it certainly had my attention. I was curious what Bama would look like with Milroe running the show there, and obviously all the lead up into the game between the off-season, I don't know, feud, I guess is what you could call it, between Jimbo and Saban. So, I mean, there was a lot of build-up, a lot of hype for that game. So it was pretty entertaining. It was good to see Jahmyr Gibbs, as much as I've doubted him being a workhorse guy. He's certainly turned into that in the 2 games that Bryce Young has been out. Quick thoughts on Milroe. I think Bill O'Brien might be one of the worst offensive coordinator fits for him. I
agree.
He had 16 rush attempts, but like 4 or 5 of them were sacks, and 4 or 5 of them were not even designed run calls. They were just they were designed passes. He missed his first or second read and just took off. So it's like, why set up a game plan for Jalen Milroe if you're not going to run the ball, have more than like 5 or 6 or 7 design runs? Like he's a guy that should be getting more of those. It's the same problem I've had with Anthony Richardson in the fit of Florida right now. It's just, it's not a system fit. So, but he's got a long ways to go passing the ball, but he sure is fun running the ball, man. It feels like that the Spider-Man meme, him and Anthony Richardson, like pointing at each other. Like they seem so similar in that sense.
Yeah, the only thing that Milroe has is just better weapons, which, I mean, finally Jermaine Burton had a pretty good day yesterday. So that I was happy to see him, again, former Georgia player. So, I'm rooting for his success. Like, he's a good guy. So, but
they've got wide receivers. If you get them ball in space and ability to make plays with the ball in their hands, like they have guys that are capable.
Well, that's what Bama's been doing. A lot of, again, Bryce Young, to me, I think, like, obviously his deep ball is incredible, but at the same time, like, Bama's offensive system a lot of times has just been get the ball down the field 5-10 yards down the field and just let the playmakers on the outside just do what they do.
Yep.
Like, it's not like they're constantly just bombs away. So if Milroe can do that, he'll be fine moving forward. I still think he is the next man up for Bama next year. And I'm not just saying that because I own Jalen Milroe everywhere in dynasty rosters. But
yeah,
at the same time, I think he'll come along to be a very good quarterback for Alabama moving forward. Let's talk about this on the Texas A&M side of things. Overall, like, they played their hardest in this game. I think they did exactly what they're supposed to do. Their offense at times looked a little bit better than I think we were giving credit for. Now, granted, they were spotted 14 points by Bama just constantly turning the ball over. And otherwise, this game just never would have been close. And then we could talk about the absolute wet fart that was the last play. The last play that Texas A&M was given because of a pass interference call in the end zone on their final drive. They had one play left to do, and the play call that was done was a one-read play call that was to throw to the corner of the end zone where Evan Stewart was.
Yeah.
And there was no backup plan. If Evan Stewart wasn't open, there was nothing that could be done, which was insane to me because earlier in the game, they had a very similar situation where Haynes King basically ran all the way to the right looking for a play and then threw all the way back across the field for a wide open tight end. I think it was Donovan Green. And it was completely like, hey, if nothing else is there, just throw back across the field. I don't know why they didn't try a similar play. Like, give him multiple options at a crucial moment in the game. It was weird. And then I found out, and this is the whole point with...
I know exactly what you're going to say.
So Jimbo Fisher, I talked about on Saturday morning, if you watched the tailgate, we were talking about Jimbo Fisher, and I said that he has to fire the offensive coordinator that he has, because they're not going to fire him, but he's going to have to fire the offensive coordinator, and he's going to have to bring in somebody new from the outside if he wants to have any kind of success here. And I find it really funny because I found out after the game, I knew this man was on the staff. I did not know that he had been elevated to quote offensive coordinator, but it makes all the sense in the world. James Coley is the same offensive coordinator that Georgia had when Kirby had to finally make that decision to bring in somebody from the outside. And I find it so ironic that Texas A&M is now in the exact same position, and they still have James Coley as a co-offensive coordinator for them. When do people realize James Coley is an incredible recruiter? That's his value. You want to have him on your staff, but he is not offensive play caller.
No, he's real bad. I actually thought you were going to go a different direction, and that is the word has come out that the Alabama defensive back that was covering Evan Stewart has said that he was looking at Jimbo when they were about to run the play, and Jimbo was screaming, "Go to Evan, go to Evan, go to Evan."
Oh my God.
And so the DB that was covering Evan Stewart was like, okay, well, I guess I'm up. I'm going to have to make a play here. And so it's just like, I'm like, that's the epitome of Jimbo, is that he's not an offensive genius. It's literally the best thing he could come up with in the most crucial play of the game was a 5-step drop for a really bad passing quarterback.
Yeah.
It into the end zone, and the DB is sitting there knowing exactly what's coming. It's just it's a really, really bad situation.
Yeah. Again, a wet fart is all I could call it. Because again, literally I was on the phone with Xavier and our other buddy Tony, and we were all waited with bated breath of all right, what's A&M gonna do here? Because they have one final chance here, and they just absolutely blew it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. We're talked about this recap long enough. Let's go ahead and run through these injured players from yesterday and everything, and then we'll get into the freakout scale and we'll get into the waiver wire. Big injuries yesterday. Jalen Daniels, quarterback out of Kansas, was taken out during the game. He fell on his right shoulder, could not play the rest of the game. That's a very unfortunate loss for Kansas. We'll get to their new starting quarterback right now, and we'll discuss how we think he'll perform. Doug Brumfield taken out early in the game against San Jose State. UNLV couldn't really perform very well after that point offensively. The Ohio State running back situation is very interesting because Mayan Williams was a late scratch before this game. Suddenly he's out. TreVeyon Henderson does play and does very well, but at one point goes down. I can't remember if it was the third or fourth quarter, and he's basically limping off the field. So OSU, as far as we know right now, is down two of their top running backs here. I'm sure we'll probably get one or two of them back next week, but even still, that's a banged up running back room right now, and it looks like they're very cautious about how they want to treat those guys moving forward. I think they know that they can probably win a lot of games without them, but even so, I think that's very interesting. Two top players from NC State yesterday, Devin Leary and Demi Sumo, Slimy Shark if you want to call him. They both got injured in their game against Florida State, and they both look like that they've got some injuries that'll probably keep them out for a little bit. Tyler Scott, right ankle injury very early in the game against USF. That basically screwed a lot of people over yesterday because that is not something that he didn't record any stats that early in the game, and you can't replace him because technically he did play. Corey Kiner, another Cincinnati late scratch. All of a sudden he was out. Gave Charles McClellan a chance to have a pretty good day there. Kanata Mumfield for Pittsburgh, he was out. CJ Donaldson, obviously West Virginia didn't play this past week, but we can confirm he will be out against Baylor. Luther Burden, star freshman wide receiver for Mizzou, got banged up again this week. He was taken out and probably will be kept on watch for a good while. And then Nakia Watson also got injured in Washington State's game against USC. Nate, any major analysis you want to give on any of those that I didn't give already, or anybody you think we're missing?
No, I mean, real quick, just we've talked about it with the Ohio State backfield, and really Ohio State, anybody that has injury situation going on, Ohio sitting anybody that that has any type of lingering issue. So they're just blowing teams out. They don't really need to play players. One thing I will say, I think we have to mention this, is it's not injury related per se, but a lot of people sat him because he's coming off an injury. And Izzy Abanikanda, man. I feel bad. Like everybody I saw was like, I had Izzy and his like 70 points sitting on my bench, and I'm like, oh man, that sucks so bad.
Dude, I know several. I don't think I know a single person who started Izzy yesterday.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, that most of the leagues I play in are best ball setup. So he's going to score no matter what. But man, what an incredible performance by him. I'm a huge Izzy fan, and I'm sad that I was probably a year early on him because I was really touting him last year. I kind of backed off a little bit, and I would say rostered him less this year. Mm-hmm. But I am really happy to see that guy show out because he's a really freakish athlete.
Izzy is finally getting busy.
No doubt, man. He is putting on a show.
Alrighty, before we get into the rest of the show here, you guys know what I gotta do. Gotta give the spiel. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe down there below. And you guys have been doing a really good job about that recently, so thank you guys very, very much. And if you're listening to this on podcast, make sure you leave a 5-star review. And if you are on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave a written review. Again, love reading those from you guys whenever you do drop them down. Other thing I want to throw out here real quick, I have put out a survey on Twitter. It is a very, very short survey, but it basically just kind of runs through and asks some simple questions about chasing the Natty. Just to give you an idea of the kind of questions, again, I ask you about like how often you listen to the show, where did you hear about us, things like that, but also like, what do you like about the show? What do you not like about the show? What do you think something we can improve? What's something that you want to see less of on the show? Just very simple questions like that. You don't have to give a super long answers or anything. I did this last year and it helped out a ton in regard to making some changes in the second half of the season that people seem to really appreciate. And so I'm doing it again this year as kind of a mid-season checkup with everybody, and really appreciate you guys if you can go out and do that for us real quick. And again, as always, we are part of the CFF team here at Campus Canton. It is myself, Nate Marquise, Brandon Sanders, and Chris Moxley, as well as our DFS gurus and Ethan Sowers and Chris K. We got podcasts, we got articles, we got CFF weekly rankings, everything you guys need for your CFF needs. Whether you are playing it in a regular CFF league or if you're playing in a Campus Canton league, we're here to help you out as much as we can. Make sure to go check out all of the other awesome podcasts on the Campus Canton feed. Tons of great stuff for you guys there. If you can't find something that you don't like there, quite frankly, you're not looking hard enough. So, with that being said, let's get into this freakout scale. We got 4 players we're going to talk about here today. 2 running backs, a wide receiver, and a quarterback. Nate, first guy we're going to talk about here is Mr. Deuce Vaughn. And man, it is a hard knock life out here for Deuce Vaughn right now, mostly because we all kind of thought about it before the season started, about the idea that Adrian Martinez would be a nuisance in terms of vulturing touchdowns away from him. And then Vaughn started off pretty well to start the season. Had one game with one touchdown. Next game he had 2 touchdowns. We're like, okay, maybe this isn't so bad. He's kept 20 plus touches pretty much the rest of the way through. And then all of a sudden, 4 games in a row, he has not scored a touchdown. There is just not touchdown opportunities for him like we have gotten in the past, leading up to the very disappointing performance this past week where he only scored 4.7 fantasy points against Iowa State. Nate, where are you on Deuce Vaughn, and where are you on the scale? And also, quickly remind everybody what the scale is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So freakout scale, just basically checking the temperature of a player on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning you have no worries that this guy there's no reason to freak out whatsoever, and 10 being worst case scenario and that you just need to absolutely drop that guy. And obviously, somewhere in between with, like a 5 or so, you're looking at making a backup plan. And then once we get in that 7 to 8 range, we're talking about not only are we wanting a backup plan, but we're not even considering starting this guy until we see otherwise. So that's kind of what the scale consists of. As far as Deuce Vaughn goes, he's an interesting case. He's somebody that I think when we did our initial rankings in the offseason, I think I was the only one that did not have him in my top 5, our top 5 of the running backs. And that really was because of the Adrian Martinez factor and just how much he likes to run the ball and how he likes to run the ball around the goal line and that type of thing. And Vaughn, this is kind of similar to what we talked about with Braylon Allen last week. This is not a player we're dropping. This is probably not even a player that you're benching right now. He's still productive, but same level he produced last year, and we're just not seeing that so far this year. I would probably have him somewhere around a 4. He's still getting enough touches running the ball. The big issue is that Martinez, if he doesn't like his first read, he takes off running.
Yeah.
Whereas before, Deuce Vaughn has always been that outlet. If the quarterback doesn't like their first read, they then pass it to Deuce Vaughn. Mm-hmm. And we've seen his targets. I mean, he's only had 1 game over 3 targets this entire season. So
there's 2.
Oh, okay. I thought he had 2 games. So he's had a couple. He's only had 1 game where he's actually had significant targets.
This is true.
And that's been, I think, the biggest difference. And obviously the touchdowns have gone down this year as well. So I think we're looking at a guy that's more in that 16 to 19 point range consistently than we are a guy that was getting you 25 points a game last year.
Yeah, because again, if you look at what he's done so far this year, he's had double-digit fantasy points in at least in half PPR formats in every single game except for this past week. And a lot of people will probably be thinking oh God, is this last week indicative of what's to come? No, Iowa State's defense is very, very good. They held Kansas to 14 points. They held Kansas State to only 10 points last week. That's a very good defense he went up against. Couldn't find the end zone. That's what you needed to have a good week out of him there. It is very concerning that we've gone 4 weeks and he just hasn't found the end zone, despite the fact that he has had 2 games in the last 4 weeks that are over 100 yards. 4 out of the 6 games so far this year, he's been over 100 yards. He has the volume and everything. It's just the touchdown opportunities have gone away. That has to balance out at some point, right? There's no way he continues to go the rest of the season without scoring touchdowns. He's going to have good weeks for you moving forward. I am with you, Nate. I'm going to put it at a 4. I might lean a bit more towards a 3, but I think it's enough to where it's if this continues to be a problem to where he's only getting a touchdown once every 3 weeks, then you're going to start looking for a backup option. You want guys who score touchdowns as much as I'm definitely in a scenario where my guys refuse to ever score touchdowns, it feels like.
I think the good thing for Deuce is that after they have a bye week. After that, they've got TCU and Oklahoma State coming up. Those are offenses that can really kind of push the tempo and score points. And that's what we want. We want that shootout potential. Iowa State just doesn't offer that. They're not going to get into shootouts. So I think that we're coming off of a bad week and people may want to freak out, but I would say don't freak out yet. I think there's better weeks coming for him.
All right. Moving on to our second running back here. We got to talk about Jordan Mims, running back out of Fresno State. This has really less to do with Jordan Mims as a talent per se, and I guess more to do with Fresno State in general. This offense just doesn't look the same without Jake Haener. I think Jordan Mims, the first couple of weeks, could really take advantage of the fact that everybody wanted to focus on the passing game of Fresno State, but now they don't really have that anymore. They can key in on Jordan Mims, and he has been stuck in the 9 to 11 point fantasy range pretty much ever since. And this past week, a lot of his stuff kind of came through the receiving game rather than him rushing on the ground. He's had 2 weeks in a row of sub 3 yards per carry. Definitely very concerning, I would say. I'm more concerned with Jordan Mims than I am with Deuce Vaughn, I would say. Really, until Haener comes back, and I don't know when Haener comes back. I've heard some people say that this could be a longer-term injury, but I've also heard some people say that he could be back in the next week or two. Regardless, as far as I'm concerned, Mims might be a guy that I am putting on the bench. Until then, maybe spot starting him here or there, depending on the matchup. But he didn't really do that well against UConn. If there's a spot matchup, UConn is it. I don't know. I'm putting him right here at about a 6. What do you think, Nate?
He's a 7 for me. Until we see Jake Haener come back, he's absolutely on my bench. It's a situation, I compare this to Oklahoma as well, too. I don't know that there's two quarterbacks in the country more important to their team's offensive success than Dylan Gabriel and Jake Haener. And we've seen that the last 2 weeks. It's a totally dysfunctional offense with Fife and Bevel back there. And it's to the point where it's difficult to start anyone at all on that offense, let alone the quarterbacks. Don't even start the quarterbacks, but the rest of the offense is a problem too. So he's a bench for me until Haener comes back.
Which is unfortunate because he had such a great start to the season. He looked like he was an absolute stud, and then now scoring opportunities have gone away. People have keyed in on him. Like I said, he's going sub 3 yards per carry at this point. It's not a good situation overall for him.
No doubt.
Let's move on to our next player here. We're going to a wide receiver. And we're going to talk about Charlie Jones, Chuck Zizzle, our man of the year. He was the wide receiver 1 throughout most of the year, absolutely killing it. Last 2 weeks, though, sub 10 fantasy points in 2 different outings. One against Minnesota, one against Maryland. I feel like people could forgive the Minnesota one for the most part. It's a pretty good defense. Still got 10 targets. Oh, well, couldn't find the end zone. That's fine. But then 2 weeks in a row, couldn't find the end zone again, even though Purdue was able to score 31 points. Targets go down a little bit. The first time he has seen single-digit targets this year, and he was only able to catch 3 of them for only 15 yards. Nate, are you concerned about Chuck Zizzle here?
I have a little bit of concerns. So I mentioned it last week. I'm starting to work on an article that is going to be guys that have a second half regression from their performance in the first half. And I'm kind of bummed that he actually really struggled this week because he was somebody I was already going to put on the list. And now it's like he's kind of taken away some of that fire that I was going to throw out there on that article. But he's been banged up. Aiden AOC's been banged up a little bit too. And I think this kind of slide has coincided with maybe they're not 100% healthy. And that's what we're looking at. I think we're also getting into Big Ten play and defenses in the Big Ten, and pace of play in the Big Ten is simply just not as conducive for big time fantasy outputs. Yep. He's still the wide receiver 1 for Purdue in a Jeff Brom system. So I'm, again, similar to Braylon Allen, I'm not going to lose my mind freaking out here. But kind of like Deuce Vaughn, I'm kind of probably in that 4 range. I'm just kind of monitoring it, and I'm going to see what's going on, and maybe try to stockpile another couple wide receivers on my roster just in case we see this trend continue. But I do think he still has some better weeks ahead of him.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna put myself at a 3 here. Again, lowest targets on the year, no doubt, a little concerning there. It's something to watch closely. If he sees another week like this where, again, he's not the far and away number 1 wide receiver, probably not as good of a fantasy option as we were kind of thinking he would be earlier in the season. But again, I can kind of hand wave both of these weeks in certain ways. Like you said, both he and AOC have been banged up. Minnesota is a pretty good defense. Maryland a little less forgivable, but again, like you said, there's going to be some regression because now people know to key in on Charlie Jones. They know we should, if we're going to win this game against Purdue, we need to take away Charlie Jones. Otherwise, it's just going to make it too easy for Purdue. So, and again, unfortunately, as good as Charlie Jones has been, I don't think he is the kind of elite receiver that can overcome a defense keying in on him. And so that could be trouble for him definitely down the line. Purdue has to be able to prove that they have other options they can dump out to. I think they did that against Maryland. Again, they were able to win with 31 points there. But regardless, definitely a guy that I think we should definitely be watching closely over the next couple of weeks. One more here, Nate, and I'm afraid to send you down a rant here about a certain other player that you love dearly. But we got to talk about Tanner Mordecai, quarterback out of SMU here. 11.5 fantasy points this past week in standard scoring formats. The entire SMU offense could not find the end zone for the life of them. If you started any SMU player this past week, unless you're in a PPR league, you were crying. Rashee Rice was still pretty good. Again, over 100 yards. Still couldn't find the end zone. Again, the big problem was the one person who scored a touchdown for SMU last week was Velton Gardner, who I don't think anybody has rostered. I started Trey Siggers in one league, and I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me. That's supposed to be Trey's touchdown. Regardless, Mordecai could not get this offense really rolling last week, despite the fact that, again, he had almost 300 yards passing. But his longest pass was 25 yards. Just couldn't really get it going at all. About 62% completion rating. And then late in the game, we saw the man of the hour, Preston Stone, finally come in and get some playing time. So, Nate, how concerned are we moving forward with Tanner Mordecai?
Well, I think if you own Tanner Mordecai, you need to also own Preston Stone. I think you need that handcuff. We talked about it at the beginning of the year that I felt like that handcuff was necessary. This is kind of why. Now, having said that, the staff continues to stick with Mordecai. I mean, Stone didn't come in until very late in that game, so it wasn't like they made a move at halftime. But it is concerning. They've lost 3 in a row. At some point, does Rhett Lashley say, okay, I'm throwing in the towel on this season. It's time to get the future ready, and turns it over to Stone. I think that's definitely a possibility. I probably on our freak out scale, I probably put him somewhere around a 6. He still is producing enough that if you don't have a ton of great quarterback options, you could still start him. But every time you throw him out there, you risk that at some point in that game, he is no longer the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I'm going a little harsher with this one. And like, again, I'm the big Mordecai fan. I was the one who kind of maintained that Mordecai probably still wins the job throughout the offseason. But right. I'm benching him. At least in the leagues that I have him in and everything, I can find better options, safer options to start week to week. Guys, I know who are going to start. I do not, especially in competitive leagues like I'm in right now, where I have to win week after week, I can't run the risk that all of a sudden my quarterback is going to be benched at halftime any given game if it's not going well. So for me, I say bench him, and if you're really struggling at quarterback, try to find something on the waiver wire and just spot start him at least over the next couple of weeks. See if Mordecai can find his mojo again here. But for now, I think he's a bench rider.
I would say the interesting thing with this QB room is that they have a bye week this next weekend. And they played early in the week, obviously on Wednesday. No, actually, I don't know if does that count. No, they have. I'm sorry. I'm looking at their old schedule, but their bye week ended up being the last week because of the hurricane situation. So, okay, never mind. I was thinking, but they do have, because they played on Wednesday, they have extra time to prepare Stone if they do indeed want to make that change.
Yes.
It was kind of my point there.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. Not unheard of at this point for teams to all of a sudden just make a change at quarterback. And I think that is a great segment to go ahead and move on into our waiver wires, where we'll talk about our first guy here, Mr. Baron Morton, quarterback out of Texas Tech, rostered on 16% of rosters. This was kind of a shock for a lot of people who were expecting Donovan Smith to be starting for Oklahoma State. Really kind of screwed him, because at first we were told that Donovan Smith just wasn't playing. He was injured. There were he just wasn't going to play, and that's why Morton was starting. But then all of a sudden he starts getting snaps at wide receiver. So therefore, if you started Baron Morton, or if you started Donovan Smith in your QB spot, you started a wide receiver technically, which is really, really unfortunate. Like, that's honestly probably more unfortunate than even somebody just getting injured at halftime. And regardless, Morton comes in, and quite frankly, he looks like what Zach Kittley wants out of his quarterback. Mm-hmm. They were passing the ball all over the field, 62 attempts in this game. He completed 39 of his passes, almost 400 yards, 379 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Also, they let him run a little bit. He had 16 runs for 46 yards and a touchdown. Nate, is Morton the guy moving forward? I mean, he's obviously the guy moving forward, but more importantly, I would say for a lot of people, is between him and Shuck. Like, if Morton continues to play like this and fits into the system like a glove like he has, do we just roll with Morton? Or is Shuck somebody that we should spot on our rosters and hold on to there in case he comes back? What's going on here with this QB situation?
I have no clue, man. It's crazy. Here we are 6 weeks into the season. I feel like we're in the exact same spot we were like 3 weeks before the season started. We've gotten a glimpse, we've gotten a peek behind the curtains that all 3 of these quarterbacks, all 3 of them have made a start. I was just going to say, it has the feeling from the staff that they have turned the page on Donovan Smith. I don't know what changed. They said that his shoulder was at a point throughout the week that he was unable to throw passes, yet they played him
at wide receiver.
He even threw a pass on a goal line situation. It was almost like he had a package. They kept talking about Donovan's going to have a package if he doesn't start. That's what we saw was Donovan's weird. He plays 3 plays as wide receiver on 1 play as quarterback. So it feels like they've turned the page. And then you add in Chuck, who's going to come back from his injury. But I tell you what, Baron Morton looked like what we expected, like what we've heard of and what we saw from him in some of the spring game. And they didn't hold anything back. That offense was clicking. They were running at a ramped up pace that they had not been running this season. And they didn't hold anything back. 62 attempts for your supposed third string quarterback. That's not what you do with a guy that doesn't know what he's doing out there. They had full faith in him.
I agree.
It feels like they've made a change, and that offense looked better. It looked more like Zach Kittley than we've seen in a while. I think he's probably the guy moving forward.
Yeah, and they did this without many of their top weapons. Miles Price did not play in this game. J.J. Sparkman did not play in this game. They were missing quite a few guys. Jared Bradley finally showed up again on the 1 week I played the under on his receptions, because he only played 10 freaking snaps last week, and I'm like, there's no way he hits 4 receptions this week.
I don't know if that's going to continue when Sparkman comes back, but maybe we'll see. But
we'll see. But he came back for the 1 week that I doubted him. So again, that's just how life goes. But yeah, Morton to me is one of the must grabs off the waiver wire this week, because this is a situation you want to roll the dice on. If Shuck comes back, takes the job back from him, whatever, you lose him in a week or two. But the weeks you have him are great. But what if he holds on to this job? There is a chance in 84% of leagues right now, you could be grabbing a guy off the waiver wire that could end up being a league winner down the line if he truly continues to make that step forward and score 30, 35 plus points any given week for you. I think he's an absolute grab right now.
Yep.
Moving on to our next guy. We talked earlier about Jalen Daniels going down to injury in that game. Still unsure as to how long he will be out, but until then, let's talk about the guy who came in for him, and that is Mr. Jason Bean. The Mean Bean, quarterback out of Kansas, past week scored about 29.88 fantasy points. Rostered only 2% of rosters. Makes sense. He is the backup quarterback at Kansas, and ain't nobody wanting to pick this guy up as a stash anywhere. But he had a pretty good, again, he came in and performed very, very well for Kansas. Didn't have the volume you like, only had 24 attempts, but in those 24 attempts, threw 4 touchdowns. Sounds a lot like what Jalen Daniels has been doing. Sounds like this offense will continue to roll with Jason Bean at quarterback. Nate, what do you think about him?
Yeah, it's crazy. We're talking about the Kansas backup quarterback as being an option and a very startable option if Jalen Daniels is out, because they have Oklahoma next week, who can't defend anybody right now. Don't get me started. But yeah, and Jason Bean he's a previous starter at North Texas. He started some for Kansas last year before Jalen Daniels took over. So he's got experience, but he looked comfortable in that offense when Jalen Daniels went out. He will make some throws. He had an interception in this game that was literally one of the worst passes I've seen all season. He will make some throws that leave you scratching your head. But this dude is crazy fast. He's in that Mike Wright kind of mold for Vanderbilt. Not a great passer, not going to be super efficient in the pass game, but if he gets 12 to 15 carries, he will get you 100 yards. So yeah, it's a good time. It looks like Daniels might be out for at least a few weeks. So I think he's worth a snatch, and obviously with Oklahoma coming up on the schedule next, it's a pretty viable start.
Yeah, I would say, and this is just me talking about our quarterbacks in general. This to me is a very good week for quarterbacks off the waiver wire. You got a lot of guys here who are not rostered in a whole ton of leagues that I think if you are struggling at quarterback, this is the perfect week to grab one of these guys. We only have 4 that we're going to really dive into, but any of these 4 I think are legit options kind of moving forward here. Let's move on to the next one here. This guy's rostered only 1% of leagues here, so even if you're in the deepest of deepest, this guy is probably available wherever you're looking. Let's talk about Cooper Lega, Utah State quarterback. Like I said, rostered only 1% of leagues. Nate, was Logan Bonner just a problem the whole time for Utah State? Because that offense looked awful the first couple of weeks. Nothing like we wanted to see out of Blake Anderson. And now Cooper comes in after they finally kind of threw the towel in on Bonner. He, I believe, is basically retiring from football at this point. They're moving forward with Lega. And this offense looked like it used to. Brian Cobbs is getting fed every week. They have their number 1 wide receiver that they're feeding every week. They're scoring points. Cooper Lega has scored 26 and 30 points these past 2 weeks. He can run a little bit, which is something that we haven't really seen a lot from Blake Anderson quarterbacks in the past. He's had 52 and 76 yards in the past 2 weeks, as well as a touchdown in each one. What do we think about Lega?
So I think you touched on it there. His ability to run makes up for their poor offensive line play that they've had this year. I think 2 things were happening that was causing their offense to struggle: poor offensive line play, and Logan Bonner just simply was not healthy. Yeah. And that's a problem when you've got a statue quarterback with a bad line and isn't able to pass the ball the way he'd like to. So, I mean, he's got 33 rushing attempts the last 2 games. So he's athletic enough to get out of some bad situations what the offensive line may put him in. And it's an offense that we were all looking forward to investing in at the beginning of the season. So maybe they're back on track. And you know what will else help get back on track is that they have Colorado State and Wyoming for the next 2 weeks. So it looks like he's comfortable in this offense, and Brett Anderson is catering to his abilities, and that's a good setup moving forward.
Yeah. Again, I really like this guy. I really like Lega moving forward. He's got several years of eligibility if you're in a dynasty league or anything like that. Like I said, he just looks like he runs the system that we've been wanting to see all year. He is providing us the fantasy asset that we want. I think he is 100% worth a look at for you guys moving forward. And also, we saw last year, Utah State got better as the year went along. Maybe we see kind of the same thing this year, especially now that they've made the switch at quarterback. And as he gets more and more reps week after week, it could be a legitimate asset down the line. We'll see.
Yep.
Last quarterback we're going to talk about here. This man is somebody that a lot of us kind of pointed to as like, hey, there is everything goes right for him. He could be an incredible asset for CFF. And we're finally seeing it, as far as I can tell. We're talking, of course, about Chevan Cordeiro, quarterback out of San Jose State, the transfer from Wyoming, rostered only 25% of leagues right now. Past 2 weeks, we have seen 30 fantasy points and 40 fantasy points out of him. We're seeing what we've been wanting to see. First of all, they've started chucking the ball around a whole lot more. He has seen passing attempts of 37 and 27 the past 2 weeks. He has been throwing touchdowns, but even more so, he is also running the ball quite a bit. 11 rushing attempts and 14 rushing attempts the past 2 games, both of which include goal line carries in which he has gotten plenty of touchdowns out of. He's gotten 4 rushing touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. I like Chevan Cordeiro quite a bit here, especially as they move into Mountain West play, where, again, it's a conference where a lot of points are scored once these guys start playing against each other. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, Cordero is actually really interesting. I'm surprised that he's not owned in enough leagues at this point. That's kind of crazy. He's proven enough to where he should have been owned. I will equate him to G5 Spencer Sanders. He's up and down throughout the season, but at the end of the year, he's put up good stats, and he never seems to run out of eligibility. He's still got another year left. But yeah, I think that this Brett Brennan offense at San Jose State is one that I talked about before the season that I think you can buy low, and there are some really good assets there, and they are going to overperform expectations. And I think we're starting to see that this year, especially as they get into conference play. I think there's a really good chance he becomes a QB1 for a lot of rosters.
Yeah. Probably not the QB1 like our friend Ethan Sowers, his hot take earlier before the season. But I've always liked Cordeiro in this offense. So I think we're finally seeing what a lot of us were kind of seeing before the season started.
Yeah.
All right, a couple honorable mentions I want to throw out here. First of all, Nathan Rourke. We talked about him last week. No need to really kind of rehash all that again here, but he's still under 40% rostered. I just want to throw him out there. He's still available in a lot of leagues. He has proven himself to be a true Maction quarterback for this year. Go ahead and pick him up. And then 2 guys, very similar situations here that I think are worth an honorable mention. That is Brock Doman out of Louisville and Malik Hornsby out of Arkansas. Both of these teams are going into a bye this week, so there is a decent chance that they both have their starting quarterbacks, Malik Cunningham and KJ Jefferson, by the time week 8 rolls around, which is when they next play. But even still, I would keep an eye on both of those guys. Keep an eye on those situations. If you have room on your roster, maybe stash them just in case they have to start again. Because if they have to start again, they're both dual threat guys going up against teams where they can absolutely take advantage of it. I would say that. Nate, anything you want to say on any of those honorable mentions real quick?
Just invest in Ohio.
Yeah,
Ohio's offense is incredible right now.
Oh yeah,
and they give up a lot of points. And invest in Ohio, quarterback, running back, wide receiver.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into a little bit more of Ohio's situation here. But first, let's go over to the running backs here. We'll try to pick up the pace just a little bit here for you guys. But first things first, we're going to talk about another Maction quarterback here. We're going to talk about Clyde Price, running back out of Akron, rostered only 1% of rosters. We've talked about in the past, you want the Joe Moorhead running back 1. He is known for just pounding the hell out of their number 1 running back. It is kind of shifted between several guys. It was Joselle Norrells, then it was Cam Wiley. Now Clyde Price kind of looks like he is the guy right now, with the other 2 banged up right now. Last 2 weeks, 23.7 fantasy points. Last week, 27 fantasy points. Is seeing a ton of work in the receiving game as well. 4 and 10 targets over the last 2 weeks. And plenty of touchdowns to go around for him. He has scored 5 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. Nate, what do we think about Clyde Price here?
I think he's somebody that I started paying attention to last week, and then he followed it up again this week. Wasn't efficient by any means,
no.
But like you mentioned, the volume is there. This is a Joe Moorhead offense. If you guys liked what Travis Dye did for Oregon last year, you're gonna like a Joe Moorhead offense because that was his offense. So he's getting involved in the pass game, which is really nice to see. They're not going to be great, but the volume is there to carry and make them, fantasy relevant a lot of weeks. Same with DJ Irons, And
again, they're a perfect action team. They're terrible, but they'll find ways to score pretty much any given week. I don't think. Yeah. I think Joe Moorhead has gotten this offense to a point that this isn't quite the Akron of the past, where it's like, oh God, they could put up less than 10 points any given week.
Right.
I think they'll find ways to score multiple touchdowns any given week. So
yeah, they're
Clyde Price would be a big part of that.
Yeah, they're averaging 32 points a game their last 2 games in MAC play. So yeah,
exactly.
There's potential here for sure.
All right, moving on from a system that loves to run the ball, but now we're going to talk about a running back from a Mike Leach system at Mississippi State. We're going to talk about Dylan Johnson, rostered at 26% of leagues right now. Nate, this feels backwards. What are we doing with a running back out of a Mike Leach system?
It's kind of crazy, but he has produced some pretty fantasy relevant running backs during his time at Texas Tech, at Washington State, and now at Mississippi State. And I think, and obviously the problem we had is that they were split here between him and Marks, and I think Dylan Johnson's the better player, and I think Mike Leach is starting to take note of that as well too, and has kind of shifted in his direction as well. So it's hard to guess what weeks are going to be the big weeks, but there are some blow up weeks here, and you always have that nice floor if you're in a PPR league where he's going to get you. 5 or 6 catches. So I think that there's a viable running back option here in this Mike Leach system.
Yeah, that's what I was going to tell people here real quick, is that this isn't even a running back for Mike Leach that is dependent on that passing. Obviously, it's a nice bonus at this point. Over the last 2 games, 14 attempts, 17 attempts, he hit 100 yards this past week against Arkansas. He's getting touchdowns on the ground. He's getting opportunities every week near the goal line. Definitely frustrating for us Will Rogers managers, but regardless, like, if you're a Will Rogers manager, maybe you go pick up this guy and just try to monopolize the points that Mississippi State scores every week.
Yeah, I think that's actually a legit play. It's a weird stack, the QB running back stack, but it's definitely an option. I mean, with Mike Leach's last year at Washington State, what was his name? Max
Borghi.
Borghi was the running back that you could stack, and it was like if you had the quarterback and the running back, you were almost essentially getting every touchdown that they scored, and they score a lot of touchdowns. So you still got to keep an eye on what kind of workload Jaquavius Marks is getting, but it looks like this trend is that Dylan Johnson is getting an increased workload.
Yeah. Moving on to our next running back here. This is a man that I did not keep the faith well enough, and Mike Bainbridge definitely called me out at his Discord about it because he noted the fact that after this man blew up this last week, that I dropped this man in a dynasty roster after a couple of weeks of him not really doing much to start the season. We're going to talk about Mike Washington, the running back out of Buffalo, rostered on 11% of rosters. Huge shout out to Chris Moxley, who basically was the first man to really get in on Washington and really kind of let everybody else know about it. This past week, along with the entire Buffalo rushing attack, it felt like absolutely dominated Bowling Green. 16 attempts, 155 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Just an absolute monster game from him. And again, just really looked like the best running back that Buffalo had to offer this past week. And Maction, like I've been saying, it's right around the corner. He's been looking good in the games that he has been playing in Maction. Against Eastern Michigan, 21.4 fantasy points. Miami of Ohio, which looks like Miami of Ohio has a legit defense for Maction. That's definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. But he scored 12.7 fantasy points in that game. And in this past week against Bowling Green, 28 fantasy points for him. Nate, what do you think about Mr. Washington here?
The nice thing is, when we came into this season, it was a 3-headed monster that we were trying to figure out with this backfield. We know it's at least down to 2 now. It's him and Cook, and it appears that he is starting to kind of gain that momentum, similar to Dylan Johnson. But Cook's still been very involved. He was still very involved in that Bowling Green game. They won't get to play Bowling Green every week. In fact, they don't even play Maction this next week, but it's UMass, so that's good.
If they can't have Maction, UMass might be your next best option.
That's right. Curious to see how sustainable this is. He had a 92-yard touchdown run this past week, so that was a big chunk of that 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, but with UMass coming up, it's either you grab him now or you probably miss the boat. And the likely way this plays out is he has another good game against UMass. And so you might as well just go ahead and snag him now while ownership percentage is still really low.
Yeah. Again, he's available pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
So moving on here, again, we keep it with the systems. We keep it with the guys that are the lead backs in systems that we love. Let's talk about C.J. Beasley, running back out of Coastal Carolina. Also, honestly, I'm kind of surprised we haven't really talked about this already, but Braden Bennett, down at the start of the year, still hasn't come back with a mystery injury on him. I have a feeling I doubt we see him at all this year. And then Reese White kind of killed it for a couple of weeks there, but he's now injured. So who's the next man up? Here he is, Mr. C.J. Beasley. And pretty much ever since week 3, he's kind of been killing it most weeks. He has seen double-digit fantasy points every single week. Lowest he's seen was against Georgia Southern, 14.9 fantasy points. Not the greatest day in the world, but every other day, all the other games, 18, 29.8, 25.7 this past week against UL Monroe. You want to have the lead back at Coastal Carolina, especially if the other guys are injured and they're just solidified down to one guy. Now, when they have everybody, it becomes a game of, all right, which back goes off what week? Beasley's the only guy they've really got right now. So I think he is a play any given week. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm with you. It does not appear that Braden Bennett is coming back anytime soon. He's not traveling with the team. He's not suiting up, anything like that. Reese White, probably a little bit closer, but still doesn't sound like he's quite there yet either. So, I mean, you're probably looking at least another 2 to 3 weeks of him being the guy in that backfield. And the nice thing is, too, is that even if White does come back in a few weeks, this is still a backfield that's proven that they can support multiple fantasy relevant running backs.
Oh, yeah.
So I still think there's some value there, even when that backfield gets a little bit healthier. But I think there's big time value for him as they play Old Dominion, who's coming up this week.
Yep. Again, in Coastal Carolina, again, the very efficient team. Everybody on that team knows how to run the offense. C.J. Beasley should be no exception. Yep. Last running back we're going to talk about here. I'll go through this one pretty quick, but it's Percy Agie-Obese, running back out of James Madison. What was it?
Good job. Good job with that.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Rostered in 8% of leagues right now. I was a little disappointed with the start of the season. He had a good game against Norfolk, but then he goes down with injury. He misses a couple of weeks here. And they slowly brought him back against Texas State, but Latrell Palmer got more carries in that game. And so I started really getting concerned about him and the idea that he could be the workhorse back for James Madison moving forward. All of that got put to the side this week when he had 21 attempts for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns against Arkansas State. Now, granted, he won't be able to play Arkansas State every given week. But regardless, the fact that he's already kind of taken over that lead back role again, it is definitely something I am looking forward to. I think he is somebody that if you're just looking for volume, if you're looking for a steady Eddie every single week, he is the perfect guy for that. What do you think about Agie-Obese here, Nate?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit more concerned with him than you are, just because I don't like to see that fluctuation in volume and one guy being the workhorse one day and then him.
Well,
But
again, he was injured for a couple of
yeah,
weeks there.
yeah, if he was a little banged up, then that makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, this is a high-powered offense, and you want pieces of it for sure. They're actually ranked now. They're undefeated, and they are scoring some serious points. And if he's going to be the lead dog there, then yeah, you've got to try to snatch him up and hope that this kind of workload continues. He provides nothing in the pass game, so he needs to get you that 18 to 25 carries to be really fantasy relevant.
Yeah, agree 100%. Honorable mentions at running back here. Got two MAC running backs. We've discussed both of them before, so that's why we're going to make it quick here. But one of which Nate and I were just going to take a victory lap on because, man, this guy's been awesome. But first, we got to talk about Samson Evans. God, he is so frustrating because it is like you don't know what weeks he's going to pop off, but he will. So if you're in a deeper league and you need to grab a guy that, especially as bye weeks are coming up and you just need somebody to plug in and you're just praying to God that this is the week that he goes off, Samson Evans at Eastern Michigan is probably your guy right there. And then the better option out of the two is to go grab Bangura at Ohio. This man has been incredible. And like Nate mentioned, that Ohio offense is kicking. They are scoring points any given week against any of their MACtion competition. And Bangura is a huge part of that any given week. Go pick him up right now. Don't make the same mistake again. Nate, what are your thoughts on Evans or Bangura?
I don't know if we haven't convinced you to pick up Bangura yet. I don't know what it's going to take. So I've got nothing to say to you. Just pick this man up.
That sounded like such a disappointed father tone right there. Like, I have nothing to say to you. That's pretty good stuff. From one Nate Marquise victory lap to another here. Let's go ahead and get into our wide receivers here. And let's talk about your boy, Nate, Devontae Walker. You called this before the season. And quite frankly, it is a crime we haven't talked about this man already. Devontae Walker, quite frankly, is just straight up on fire. He is producing no matter who he is going up against the last 4 weeks. LIU, 14.7 fantasy points. UGA, Georgia, 20.1 fantasy points. University of Ohio, 15.5 fantasy points. And then this past week against Miami of Ohio, just absolutely went off, 33.1 fantasy points. Nate, is there anything else you can say really to convince people that Devontae Walker is absolutely a piece moving forward?
I mean, I'd be lying to you if I told you I expected this kind of production in his first year as a starter. But I am happy to be the conductor of the Devontae, the Tez Walker train, man. He's a stud. He's so fast. And this offense, he's so fast. And you know what? Colin Schlee can throw the ball really far. So when you have a really fast guy and a guy that can throw the ball really far, it makes for really, really cool fantasy production. So 15 targets last game. Well, I mean, what can you say? I mean, that's really all you want to see is volume. And this is an efficient offense. So if you're getting 15 targets from an efficient offense, that's beauty. And they play in their playoff weeks, Bowling Green, Eastern Michigan, and Buffalo. I don't know, man. It's a perfect setup.
It really is. And like, the best part about this is that Walker isn't taking away from Dante Cephas, who everybody invested in during the offseason. Cephas is still eating every given week. You posted in our Slack chat this past week, Cephas and Walker combined for 29 targets, and I think
32 by the end of the day. 29, yeah, 32 by the end of the day.
32 by the end of the day. They were both just absolutely eating. I guess I took away from Marquez Cooper yesterday. If you played Marquez Cooper, you were not a big fan of that. But even still, like, these guys are both eating. If you can get both of these guys on the same roster somehow, they're both startable any given week. You don't have to guess which one it goes to. He is to me, outside of maybe like Baron Morton, I would say Devontae Walker might be the most important pickup in any league this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful situation there at Kent State. It's what we want, where every week who's getting the ball, and it's a high octane offense, and they're actually worse on defense than I anticipated. After I watched them play against Washington and Oklahoma and Georgia, I was like, you know what, they're gonna potentially shut some teams down in MAC play, and it's gonna limit the ceiling because they're not going to be playing in as many shootouts. That appears to not be the case. They're going to play in some shootouts.
Oh, yeah. Moving on from one MAC team to another, I told you guys we're going to talk about this offense even more, but we got to talk about Wiggles. Sam Wiggles. I don't care if that's not how you pronounce his name. He will be Wiggles in my heart all day long. But Sam Wiggles, the wide receiver out of Ohio, rostered on 3% of leagues right now. This dude has looked really, really good for Ohio the last couple of weeks. Last 3 weeks, 11 targets, 7 targets, and 7 targets last 2 games. Over 100 yards each. This past week, he had 7 receptions, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Absolutely monster week moving forward. If this is Rourke's top wide receiver with how efficient this offense has been, this is a must grab right here. This is the kind of guy that you take advantage of in action. We talk about all the time. You could draft guys early in the season in order to invest from action, but we always kind of forget about the guys that kind of show up as the season moves along. And this to me is one of those guys who is a potential, I'm not going to say league winner because he's not that high of a guy, but any given week as action plays out, this is the man to look for. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, he's produced when they're not playing P5 competition like Iowa State or Penn State. He's absolutely balling out right now. I had this game on in the background while I was watching some of the other games. I wish I'd have turned the volume up to get the correct pronunciation of how he says his name. But yeah, man, you got to snatch this guy up. Similar to Devontae Walker, the offense is just too. They just are going to be in too many shootouts. 55-34 was what the score was with Akron. I mean, the 50, they gave up 52 points to Fordham.
Yeah,
they're gonna give up points. He's gonna have to be used.
Yeah, again, I'm looking at it like you said, when they're not playing Power 5 competition, they're scoring. They have scored 41, 59, and 55 points in 3 out of their last 4 games. There's plenty of points to go around for the Bobcats.
Yep.
Next 2 wide receivers I'm going to talk about here, I'm not nearly as confident in as like guys who start any given week or as like potential CFF guys down the line, but they're in similar situations in the fact that they both are on teams that want to run the ball just down your throat, but they have to have a receiving outlet in order to keep defenses honest. Otherwise, those defenses are going to keep stacking the box against them. And this first one here, Trey Shropshire, wide receiver out of UAB, injured to start the year, didn't really play a whole ton, but now in these last 2 weeks, he has seen 9 targets in each of those games, has scored a touchdown in both of those games, still being used as a deep threat like we saw last year. I think last year he averaged like 29 yards per reception. Mm-hmm. This is a guy you could pick up and just kind of throw out there. And again, a little bit reliant on the deep pass in order to be productive, but I think he's definitely worth a look in a lot of leagues. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, he'll be a little bit maddening as far as trying to figure out when his big weeks are going to come, because you're right. He's very reliant on the big play. He's really athletic. He's got NFL size. He's a guy that will probably make a roster on Sundays. He's 6'3", 200. And you're right. They don't throw the ball a lot, but it appears when he's healthy, they do throw the ball, it's coming his way. So yep. He's somebody it's hard to predict when he's going to go off, but there is potential there.
Yeah. And again, I'm just going to move right along to our other wide receiver here because he is in a similar boat in my opinion. And that is, I can't believe the words are coming out of my mouth here. Wide receiver out of Wisconsin, Shamiri Dyke, rostered on 2% of rosters. Again, you're probably listening to me being like, Jared, like a Wisconsin wide receiver, are you freaking serious here? A little bit, yes, because first of all, he had an insane week this past week, but that's not the whole reason to get him. He has gone 2 weeks in a row with double-digit targets. I think this is a very similar situation where Wisconsin realized, especially after last week against Illinois, they have to be able to pass the ball to somebody. Otherwise, they're just going to get stacked in the box, and Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi can't overcome that. So, who's their guy they're now going to? It looks like it's going to be Dyke each week here in order to keep defenses honest. He looks like he's performing the best out of Wisconsin wide receivers. Do I expect what he did last week any given week? Hell no. But even still, a guy who gets possibly double-digit targets any given week, that is the kind of guy that I want to look for here. Nate, you look very skeptical right now, but I will give you, I will let you have the floor on this one.
I don't think I've ever owned a Wisconsin wide receiver, to be honest with you, in 15 years of doing this. How confident are we that it's pronounced Dyke?
Not very.
I think there's a chance it's DK.
DK? I honestly kind of like DK better.
I don't know.
Shamiri DK.
Shamiri DK. Yeah, I guess maybe in some deeper leagues. The nice thing is they have Michigan State next week.
Yes. And
there really isn't a backfield or a secondary that gives up massive points quite like Michigan State does. So you could justify that move and at least spot start him maybe against Michigan State and Purdue. But that's just kind of where I'm at with it. Maybe in slightly deeper leagues or a spot start if you're really scrounging for a wide receiver this coming week as they face Michigan State.
Yeah, like I said, I am not super confident in this one.
Right.
But I figured, again, especially with the week he had last week, it was at least worth mentioning him here. Speaking of guys just to mention, Nate, you threw on two wide receivers here for honorable mention. I think you should be the one to explain why they're so important.
Yeah, I listed Bryson Green here for Oklahoma State. They're starting to kind of pick up the tempo with their offense. He's been really involved this past week, 9 targets, 5 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown. They've got TCU coming up next, which has some shootout potential there. Obviously, they're starting to get a little bit more healthy with Bray coming back at wide receiver, but he played. Bray had double-digit targets, and yet Bryson Green was still really effective in this game. He's athletic, and he's been making some plays for him. The other guy I wanted to mention was Trey Cleveland, Texas Tech wide receiver. He's taken over the starting position the last 2 weeks. He stole that job from Jaron Bradley, and the last 2 weeks he's got 22 targets, 198 yards. He hasn't found the end zone, so I think that's probably why his ownership stayed pretty low. But if they're going to throw the ball 60 plus times like they did this past weekend, then there's plenty of volume to go around in that offense. And he's their deep threat. He could potentially break off a couple of long catches and be very fantasy relevant.
Oh yeah. The only problem with Texas Tech though is it feels like every time we think we have found that dude for them, they completely completely reshape their entire starting lineup the next week. To the point where all of a sudden their quarterback is a wide receiver. So, we'll go ahead. We got 2 tight ends here we'll mention real quick. First of all is Corey Dyches, and yes, I am 100% sure on that one. It is Corey Dyches, tight end out of Maryland, 2% rostered. He is a tight end wide receiver hybrid, had a really good week this past week. He has seen consistent volume each week in terms of targets, anywhere from like 3 to 6 targets any kind of given week for the most part. He is really good about catching the balls that kind of come his way. And again, this is a Maryland team that loves to pass the ball all around. He is barely a tight end, very much more of a wide receiver mold. And with none of the other wide receivers really stepping up for Maryland, could be a tiny bit of a cheat code here kind of moving forward for him. Again, if you're struggling at tight end, like I am in some leagues where, again, maybe I took on Kuntz and Trigg a whole lot. This is probably a guy that I am probably going to grab off the waiver wire and say, like, all right, you're now my starting tight end moving forward because at least you're getting consistent volume each week. What do you think about Dyches, Nate?
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you on him. They also have Indiana and Northwestern for the next 2 weeks, so that sets up really nice for him to follow up on this really solid 100-yard 2-touchdown performance with Purdue to continue to keep that momentum going and be a mainstay as a target for Talia. So I'm totally on board with this.
We move on to our second tight end here, second and last tight end we're going to talk about here today. This is a guy we talked about at the very beginning of the season. Then he went and did the unfortunate thing and get injured. But he's back now, it looks like, and that is Travis Vokolek, tight end out of Nebraska, rostered at only 16% of rosters. Just throwing this out there for people that maybe weren't paying attention to his injury and everything. As soon as he got injured, they're like, all right, drop him, don't worry about him. He is back. He has played the last 2 weeks. In both games, he has seen 5+ targets. This past week, he saw 7 targets, caught 6 of them for 46 yards and a touchdown. If he picks up what he was doing to start the season, he is going to see plenty of passing opportunity from Casey Thompson. It looks like he will become one of their top passing options for them, especially once they get down near the red zone. Took away all Anthony Grant possibilities last week, which is very, very unfortunate. But even still, you want guys here with the potential to become their team's at least maybe number 1, if not number 2 option moving forward. So Nate, what do you think about Vokolek here?
I think he's a really good player. I think that he is a big piece of that offense. The only thing I will basically say pump the brakes on is that after this week with Purdue, they have a bye week, and then they have Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. I mean, probably the best defenses in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State. I mean, that's a really, really tough stretch.
I better start looking for backup plans at Trey Palmer then too.
So just, temper expectations. And if you're looking to spot start tight ends, he's probably not a great option in that sense, given the bye and then the really difficult matchups. But he's definitely a strong option for Casey Thompson right now.
Yeah. And then one honorable mention at tight end. Again, we talked about him already. We talked about him twice already. And again, all he did was just go and have an incredible week again last week, and that is Jatavian Sanders, tight end out of Texas. They don't have a number 2 option right now at wide receiver. Jatavian Sanders has filled that role in exceptionally, that's the word I'm looking for. And with Quinn Ewers back at quarterback, that passing attack for Texas is looking very, very incredible. And he's going to be a very big part of that moving forward. So if for some reason he's still available in one of your leagues, just go grab him. Don't wait any longer. You have all the information you need. With that brings us to... go ahead. Sorry, Nate.
Oh, I was just going to say, we talked about it last week. He's got potential to be a top 10 tight end.
Dude, he's on his way to top 3 easily, especially CJ Donaldson out now too. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our show now. Nate, really, really appreciate you coming on here today to once again talk about all of these guys. Again, very good week overall, I would say, for picking up quarterbacks. I really like the top end wide receiver options. Running backs, a lot of guys that are good grabs. Put them on your roster. They're going to give you nice floors, especially if your starters are coming out in the bye weeks, these upcoming weeks. And then some pretty decent options at tight end. Is that kind of your main takeaway from our waiver wires from this week?
Yeah, the top end of the wide receivers are nice, and then it kind of drops off a little after that. But yeah, some really nice quarterback options, and then obviously we highlighted a couple of tight ends that I think are some really good options as well.
Yeah. That brings us to the end of our show. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Nate, appreciate you being on here. Make sure you guys check out the Wednesday show with myself and Chris Moxley, where we'll be doing more of your sit-start questions, putting those out every single week for you guys. I should be putting that out on Monday morning, if not by Monday afternoon, so be on the lookout for that. I'm going to remind you all again, I do have the survey out. It is on my Twitter if you're listening to this. I might pin it to the top of my profile, so that'll be the best place that you're going to go look for it. Again, very, very short survey. Don't have to write a paragraph or anything for any of the questions. Just be real quick about what do you like, what do you not like, what do you want to see more of, what do you want to see less of, and just a few other questions in there for you guys. And I'll share it with the other guys here who do CTN with me, and we'll be looking for ways to improve the show. So with that being said, Nate, do you want to tease anything before we get out of here?
Oh, just real quick, got an article coming out here in the next week or so, just talking about some guys that we could see a regression with, or we could see their production actually rise towards the second half of the season. It's kind of a mid-season report, so to speak.
Yeah, and that is going to be absolutely incredible for anybody who is looking to check up on the stock of their players. Be on the lookout for that. Again, really appreciate all you guys tuning in. Again, check out the rest of the content at campuscanton.com, and we will see you guys on Wednesday. Really appreciate it, and you all have a wonderful and blessed day.